Hello, Ken Spriggs here with part 6 of my discovery build, working on the cockpit. And as I showed in my last video, I'm actually going to be using the Stargazer, the new Stargazer cockpit interior, rather than the photo etch one from the Green Strawberry, which I'll show here in a minute. Again, Green Strawberry kit's a great kit. But there are some differences between the two, and I definitely like the cockpit much better on the Stargazer kit. Really love this kit. In fact, as you can see, I now have 2 copies. I bought a second one for a plan for the future of doing something more with that. Nothing in concrete yet, but I definitely love that interior, and I want to build the pod bay at some point on another project. So, okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. I haven't gotten done this week, and this is going to be pretty awesome. All right, thank you. All right, so as I showed in my review of the Stargazer interior, I had already mostly built the Green Strawberry interior. Here it is here. And it's pretty small compared to this one and also the pair graphics. So I did film building it. Up to this point, there are still some more parts to build. But decided I'm going to go ahead and go with the Stargazer instead. Only because it's a much nicer interior. It's designed a whole lot better with the resin parts versus the photo etch. So, so here are all the parts to the interior. You have the 2 halves for the cockpit part. I'm sorry. For the cockpit interior, the 2 halves to the front of the cockpit, the piece that replaces the kit part, and then you have the 5 pieces that make the back hallway. And you also have a little person here, which I'm going to try to paint up and put into one of the seats, which are built into the kit. Okay, so I started to do a little bit of modification, and really the only thing I have to modify is this piece right here, which is solid, and it's supposed to be light panels. This is the ceiling of the hallway. So I just cut this entire piece out, and I'm going to clean that up and just replace it with some clear styrene or some vellum, and then replace these 2 little rib parts with some styrene. To just put that on there for the lighting part. And then likewise on the, keep grabbing the wrong piece. On this piece, I have to just clean out these little rectangular sections. That's where the light comes through in the cockpit on both sides. Okay. All right, so I cut out the entire section from the ceiling where I'm gonna light it up. And then I put a little piece of styrene stripping right there at the end. You can see, just to bridge that gap a little bit. And I figured it'd be easier to go ahead and glue on the back door. It's upside down, as you can see, so that's the ceiling. Give it some stability. And I left just a little bit of an edge on either side of this, so it'll accommodate a piece of vellum. And right now I'm just gluing on some stripping, some styrene stripping, to replace those ribs that were cut out. As soon as that dries, I'll go ahead and glue that into this piece, and then that'll be ready to accommodate some lighting. All right, so I finished the vellum, and I glued the 2 pieces of stripping onto it, and then glued in place. Then I realized I haven't painted this yet. But you know what? It is white. So other than needing to light block it, I could just leave the hallway white. I don't really need to paint it, because the only color I'm going to have in it is going to be the decals, which would go on top of the resin anyway. So I'm just going to leave it as it is for the moment. I may do the floor, because I think the floor is a darker color. I need to go back and look at some screenshots. I think the floor is like a dark gray or black or something, but I could play with that and then kind of go from there. But the lighting looks good. The lighting panel looks good, I should say. It's kind of showing it there by a light. Yeah. So all I'm really going to need is one mega SMD there in a light box. And really, I could build a light box that just goes right into that opening. So, and then paint that black. And then that way there's no light going through any of the rest of the hallway. And then I don't have to worry about doing any light blocking. So, okay. I went ahead also and I cut out the window, or the light sections. I keep saying windows. The light panel sections in the cockpit. Got those sanded out. Those will be the same situation. I'll put some vellum behind them, and then I'll have that lit up. But this is going to have decals all through the inside of it too. So, okay. All right, so I built a little light box. I just used a piece of flat or sheet styrene on the bottom, cut a hole for the SMD, and then for the side pieces, I just used some of this this wide stock and just cut off pieces and put it around the edges. I just have the SMD taped on there right now. I'll show you. All right, so it's really bright. It'll be plenty of light to light that ceiling. All right, so I put the decals onto the hallway area. So I have the section with Hal over here in the left wall. And then the one over here on the right has some decals as well. Backwards there. The floor didn't come with any, but the pattern throughout the ship tends to be the black Velcro floor that they're walking around with some shoes that keep them down onto it. With the exception of the centrifuge, which doesn't need them to be held down since it has its own artificial gravity. So I still had some of the pieces left from my HDA Modelworks decal set, and I just cut out a few pieces and glued them onto there. So you can't really see it all that well, but if you are looking back in, you'll just basically see that the floor is dark. And I figured these are supposed to be white padding still, so okay. And then I got those two little decals right there and that part right there that match up with the cockpit. All right, let me get that taped together and then we'll put the light box on. And I have a little bit of cotton in there just to kind of diffuse the light a little bit because it's pretty bright. Okay, let's take a look. All right, now it definitely looks washed out in the camera, but if I get closer you can see it looks really good. You can make out the panels on the left side there with Hal. And the decals on the right side there too. And a little bit on the floor, it's dark. And of course you got your ceiling panels and the back door. If I pull away, it just looks way bright. Okay, all right. So that's not glued together just yet. I want to let the decals set up, and then I'm going to put a flat coat over them just to make sure that they're totally sealed. And then finish working on the front part of the cockpit as well. All right, so I put all the decals onto the two halves of the front cockpit. Very easy to do, just two pieces, which is really nice. So you had that top piece up there, you had the side pieces that came in two pieces, and then I painted the cushions black on the seats. So that's really the only thing I painted on this cockpit, since the whole thing is white and the decals pretty much wallpaper the rest of it. So here's the decals on the front of it, many of which you're not going to see. Like, you won't see this at all since you're only going to be looking through this right here. But what you will see, probably if you look down a little bit, are those two control panels and they'll actually go right in front of the seats. Let me see if I can get a shot of that. There we go. Yeah, so if you kind of look down, you'll be able to see them positioned in front of the seats. And of course, you'll see the back decals, and you'll be able to see the top in the hallway. So, all right. All right, so I'm working on some light boxes for the front cockpit lights. And that's these 3 panels right here on both sides, as you can see. So it's an odd shape. So I cut out some styrene pieces that would fit close enough to it. And when I glue it on, it'll seal up anything else. But there you go. So there's going to be one on the front, one on the back. They're just going to be on either side of those openings. So one on the back, one on the front, and then I'll be able to seal around it. So I'm kind of debating about painting this black first. I don't want to spray it, of course, but I can just paint it with some black and then put some white over it so I get some light blocking. I probably will, at least on these panels right here. Otherwise, the rest of it's sealed. These are going to be sealed, so I can paint those black. They won't be leaking any light because this resin is fairly translucent. I don't know if you can see that or not, but it's fairly translucent. So I don't want any light bleeding through the wall other than those rectangular panels. So that's what I'll probably do. I'll just paint the outside of them black. Just not airbrush it, just brush it on and let it dry. And then I'll be ready to go ahead and put these together and get some lights in them. I do have some chip lights that I took just a little bit of clear blue and I just put it on it just to give it a little bit of a bluish tint. I'll show you here in a second, but I have a screenshot, and it just kind of looks almost like the light in the cockpit's more of the bluish shade or bluish tint, and just kind of offset it just a little bit from the cool white of the bright hallway, so the hallway stands out. So okay, but those dried. Let me see if I can show one here. Okay, here you go. So you can see it's not blue, but it's definitely on the bluish tint, the bluish spectrum. So I think that'll be kind of cool. And then of course I will put some vellum on the outside of these to diffuse the light. And I'm thinking of only having 2. I only have like 4 of these right now. I could probably scrounge up some more, but I think 2 should be fine. Maybe like 1 here, 1 here, angled in. That way they're just kind of shining more on this part here as opposed to the openings on all 3 sides. But since the box will be sealed, it will light up the whole box. So I can take a look once I get the once I get these together, and then we'll go from there. All right. All right, and here are the completed light boxes for the side of the front of the cockpit. I have the lights in there, so basically this just goes, both of these go on either side. And they're designed to marry up right with that weird angle
that's theirs. So the two SMDs in the middle there. Let me go ahead and hold a battery onto this one here and show you what that's going to look. It looks pretty cool. Right there you go. So just the slightest bluish tint. It's not really blue, it's just kind of that blue tone to just add to it. Try to do this with one hand. Come on, get on there. Okay, but that's generally the way it's going to be. It's going to come through there. Let me put that on there better and show you. Right there you go. Now, of course, I'll have some vellum on there, and then the rest of it won't be glowing through the white resin. That'll be blocked off, so it'll just have some blue coming through into the cockpit. So, okay. And as you saw from the previous still, it does tend to look a little bit bluish there. Oh, sorry, the battery's kind of taped in place. But there we go. But it's nice because it gives that slight distinction between the cool white in the back, which is very bright, and the dimmer, more bluish hue in the front. So it offsets it somewhat. So, okay. And I did paint one of the little figures that comes with the Stargazer kit. Try to get it in there. Okay. Not really any detail on it, but I was able to get somewhat of the appearance of him with the yellow suit and the orange. That orange chest plate for the suit tank wasn't really on it. It was just all smooth, so I cut out a bit of styrene and stuck it on there and painted it orange. So no facial features or anything like that, but in the end you're only going to see it coming down from this direction, and so you're not going to see that much on him. So, but it looks pretty cool. All right. All right, so I decided to add a little more lighting detail in the front of the cockpit because with the decals, they're all static. Obviously, there's no lights or anything like that in it, and I was just going to get the blue lights coming in from the side. So what I've decided to do, call me crazy, I took a pin vise, very small little drill bit, and the control panels are very visible. They're nicely placed, which is really cool. Most of the kits that you get, most of the other ones I've done, don't have visible control panels that you can see from that little window. But these ones are very visible. So what I did was, you can see I drilled some holes through the back. I did about 10 or so on each side. And I also did some on the sides right here, as you can see, because those will be visible, and on this side as well. Because when you're looking in through this way, you can see on the side, and you can definitely see those controls very easily. You can see a little bit on those bottom sides, but I'm not really going to worry about those because these ones will have plenty of lights. So what I'm using is I put some fiber optic, very fine ones in there. I don't know what the diameter is, but I got a whole pack of them from eBay a couple years ago. And they're all different colors, but they're really not colored fibers. They come through white. I don't know why they did that. But anyway, so what I've done is I've taken a lighter and I bloomed the end. Okay, so it will stay through the hole. And then these ones here I've already put through. Let me get that Okay, so this side here on the right, I've already put them through. And then on the outside here, I just put some 5-minute epoxy over them so that they would all stay in place and they wouldn't come back out. So they're in there permanently. Now I didn't really like the, I didn't like that unfinished look on the decal part, so I took some very thin styrene, I think it's 0.010, and I just glued on some pieces around it to frame it and a piece down the center just to kind of give it more of a control panel look. So all right, so looking pretty cool. Now what I'm doing to light these up, I was playing with a few ideas, and I ended up with two different things that I had one more color changing SMD, which I love these things, so I've used two of them so far and they work really great. One other thing, what I also did was, before I put these in, I had extended them. As you saw from the previous still, they were sticking out through the opening here, and I put on most of them I put a little bit of colored Tamiya. I used red, green, and blue Tamiya clear, and I left some of them. I did about 6 of them, and I left 3 or so that were not, 3 or 4 that were not. So what it does is, initially I was going to be using some blinking white ones, but the only ones I had were blinking really fast and it didn't look natural. So what I decided to do, and I hooked it up to the color changing SMD, which I have in this little tube. And what it does is, when it's changing colors and you have like a whitish hue, you see the color of the paint, which looks like they're different colors. When it turns a darker one, like a blue or red, they all seem to turn red, and some of them are on, some of them are off. It's kind of interesting. So it definitely looks like different color buttons, and they're changing. So let me hook that up and I'll show you what that looks like. All right, so as you can see, they had a really cool effect with it. Now, I also have, let me show you first. So here's the color changing one, and I just have this into a tube. And then I have a smaller tube, which I put the fiber optics into, so they're nice and crowded together. And then that goes into this tube in order to get them to light up. So one other thing I'm doing, and I had these lying around in my stash for a while. I got them from an old RC car or helicopter, something like that somebody gave me. And what they are is they're red and blue, and they change. Hold on a second. Okay, there you go. So they just toggle back and forth between red and blue. They'd be for like a police car, that kind of thing. But they blink. So if you noticed in the video, one of them was blinking between red and blue, and it was changing at a faster pace. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'm probably use both of these, since I think they alternate. Put a tube on them, so I'll have 3 tubes. Once I get the fiber optics in the other side and the ones in the walls, I will have some of them going to the color changing, most of them. I'll have maybe 1 on each of the control panels, maybe 2 on each of the walls that go into these as well. And so they'll be blinking. And so we'll have some blinking, and we'll have some that are slowly changing in different colors and that kind of thing to give it an animated appearance. So, all right, so let me go ahead and work on the second control panel and these side walls, and we'll see about getting these going as well. Okay. All right, and there are all the fiber optics that I put into the front of the cockpit. So ballparking it, I think I have like 10 in each of the control panels. I have like 8 on either side. It's like 36, maybe a little more, give or take. So not as crazy as you would think. I mean, it wasn't that bad, just a little pin vise to drill the holes through, which were pretty easy. Just mushroom the ends of the fiber optics, dab a little bit of clear Tamiya on there on certain ones, and some of them I left white so the color changing lights would affect them. So I already kind of have a plan on how these are going to be wired up. So what I did was I used some shrink tubing and I put it over top of the white plastic tube. So these are the two LEDs that change from red to blue, but they do it the opposite. And I have those ready to go. And there's the connector. This is the color changing one. All right. Now, one thing I did realize is that I can use these really thin tubes for a few of the fiber optics, but it's too thin for a lot of them. And since most of them are going to go into the color changing, I got this other tube that was a little too thick of a diameter for this one, so I just sanded it down around the outer edge, and it fits in there now. It's pretty snug, and it has a bigger diameter than this one. Yeah, probably twice as much. So it can accommodate the rest of the fiber optics that are going to go into here. So what I need, and I also went in and I did the, try to get that under the light, sorry. Come on, focus. All right, yeah. I finished the white stripping around the right side there. Now, it was a little hard to put that center piece, well, the offset piece down the middle because of where the fiber optics were. So what I did was I put it to the side, which is fine. I mean, the control panels would be a little bit different. They wouldn't have to be exactly the same. All right, so those are all ready to go. Fiber optics are ready to go on the sides. So, come on, focus. All right, so I think at this point, I'm pretty much ready to go ahead and glue the two halves of the front cockpit together. I'm going to have to do a lot of sealing and light blocking and that sort of thing. So I carved out, this is not wanting to focus today. I've carved out some notches at the bottom for the fiber optics to go down through. I may widen those just a little bit. You're not going to see them. They're going to be hidden by the control panels. Plus I'm going to fill those in with epoxy once I get all of the fiber optics coming through. And then I can worry about getting them all gathered up. I did paint some black on the sides where the side lights are going to go. And I may have to do some more. I probably will. But I figure once I get it all sealed up and then I seal off the rest of the edges, then I can just paint black over the whole outside of it. And these side light panels can go on the sides after this whole thing's together. So that's not a problem. So, okay. So, a lot of work, but I'm ready to go ahead and start putting these two halves together. And then we'll see about getting the fiber optics all put in there and lit up. All right, so I glued the two halves together and let those dry. And I also glued the back hallway on. I did it in a couple steps. First, I glued the two halves together, and then I glued the hallway to it. Let that set up. And then I took some 5-minute epoxy. As you can see there, I painted white over it, but I put that all around the seam. Oh, I did miss a little. No, I didn't. That I left that little opening there. It's actually got epoxy on it, but I put some black on it because inside there is black and I didn't want it to show white. But otherwise, everything else, I epoxied around this piece here that I glued on, and I painted white around it. And the reason I did that is because I'm going to put a black coat over the whole thing to light block any remaining areas. Now, before I do that, I have to glue on those two side parts there, because those light panels are open. And I already did some black on those. I'll also have to tape off the front area, because really at this point, once I get those two side parts done, the front window is the only place where there will be any way for paint to get in there. Everything else is nice and sealed up tight. I trimmed off the wire of the Mega SMD, taped it on the back, and I have the fiber optics taped on the bottom, coming through the bottom for the control panels. And I still have to bring the two side ones down, so I'll do that as well. I have to get those all put into the tubes, and I'm going to have those just glued right onto the bottom here facing forward, and these are just lined up nicely right with them. And then these ones here will come down around and meet them up too. So okay, so I also took the lights, the side light panels, and I glued some vellum onto the edge of it. I just thought that was easier than trying to glue it onto that part there. I'm not really going to have an easy way to glue over top of the paint and the glue with some super glue, so what I'll do is use some 5-minute epoxy and just liberally put it around the edges. And then when that's all dry too, this will be the same thing. I'll paint these black and around them black. Everything's going to be black, so no light will come through at all, except through the front, through the cockpit window. So one other thing I did is I glued that little ridged piece at the bottom in, and right now I have taped in the resin part that comes with the Stargazer kit, and I taped off the back so we don't get that edge. But the reason for that is I want to go ahead and get this painted black. The inside of this, I'm also going to put some tape around the edges of this just so I get the inside. But it doesn't matter if I get a little bit on the outside, it's going to be painted anyway. So, but I figured when I go ahead and paint this black, I might as well get this done as well, because this front piece has to be glued onto the front of this before I attach it to the kit. And I'm going to have clear in between that, clear plastic for the windshield in between it and this one. I don't want to be having a problem with trying to paint that piece afterwards. So I might as well get it painted now. I can still sand the inner edge, which actually won't be painted because it's covered in tape, where it's going to glue on. So that little opening there, that curved part there with the tape on it, that's going to go on the front, of course. And I can put that on. I'll probably get that glued on before I do any painting, because I want that to be resin to resin, so I get a nice solid seal, and also liberally put some 5-minute epoxy around that too. So in the end, this whole section will just simply glue into the sphere top, just like that. It'll just glue right into that part there, and you'll be able to see through and see the cockpit. So okay, so let me go ahead and keep working on this, but it's coming together and should have it wrapped up here very soon. All right, so I completed all of the wiring, glued down the two side parts here on the sides, and got everything put down with some 5-minute epoxy. There's still a cut piece of tape, but I'll finish gluing those down. Got them all wrapped up at the end, which I'll still clean up a little bit. So let me just kind of show you. So everything lights up. Got all the blinking control panels there. You got the white hallway, which it's going to wash out in the camera, but There's how it looks. You got the cool bluish glow in the front of the cockpit. Got the little Frank figure there, hunched down. Looks kind of cool, even without too much detail on them. And then I have those side control panels that are blinking red and blue, as you can see there. And over there. Those ones you won't see as much, but you'll definitely see these control panels, which are really cool. And there's some color changing and some flashing, as I showed. Okay, everything secured down with 5-minute epoxy the best I could, as far as all the little fiber optics put into their tubes and glued down. So all I have to do now is finish the piece that goes on to the front of it right there, the replacement part that goes on to this, and a few adjustments to it, and then we'll be ready to get this wrapped up. Okay. All right, so just a few final details. As I showed in the previous stills from the film, there are some little, I don't know what you call them, some rib separators that have a bit of a little angle cut into them on the front of the cockpit. So I cut those out of some UV resistant styrene sheet because it's already black, but I'm going to still paint it. It took a while to figure out exactly how they're positioned because they're not, let me zoom in there a bit, because the bottom extends only to where that little ribbed part is. The top does not extend all the way out. I'm sorry, that's black, so it's hard to see it. It really only is on the inner part of it. And then you have that little bit of an angle cut into it, as you can see. So I think they turned out pretty well. I used some CA glue to glue them into place and let that set overnight. So right now I'm going back and just putting one more coat of flat black to touch up any little marks that I made and the glue marks that you can see at the bottom there, and get that finished up. And then I'll be ready to go ahead and add the clear plastic. And I'm thinking of just gluing it on the back of this, just like that tape is right there. And then I'll be able to go ahead and get that attached onto the cockpit. All right, there we go. So all finished up. I touched up the paint. So there are those curved, sorry, it's not focusing, interiors. And that inner piece is not quite in place either. It has to be glued in the right way, but I just wanted to show that. So, okay, so looking really good. Ready to go ahead and take this off of here and glue it onto the interior and get that black masked. Okay. All right, so we got the clear windows onto the cockpit insert. Looking pretty sweet. It was a bit tricky because it's really hard to glue something on and not get some glue onto the clear, and then that would look bad. So I used some styrene and I built up the top and the bottom. As you can see right there, some styrene stripping. That way I could put glue further out on the outer edge so it's not getting close to where you're going to see it. Originally it was just that inner edge that I was gluing and it wasn't looking right. I also used separate pieces. Initially I took one piece and tried to bend it, but it was kind of looking warped, so I used separate pieces. The two seams where they meet up with my curved ribs that I put on there hide where the separation is. And then on both sides, I put a little piece of styrene. You can see that black line there. It's a little piece of styrene stripping that I glued onto it first and painted it black. And then I, sorry, it's really hard to get a close-up look of that. And then I just matched the clear up to the edges of it. All right, so this is glued overnight, and I put some 5-minute epoxy to just kind of firm it down. And it's ready to go. Looks pretty cool. It's a little rough on the edges, but I'm not worried about it. I deliberately made it larger so it was easier to work with. And then once it dried, I just cut off the pieces. But you're only going to see that insert from the outside. You're not going to see the rest. So I test fitted it. It works great. It's ready to be attached. So I'm going to get that glued on and liberally put some 5-minute epoxy around the edges, making sure it does not seep down in onto the windshield. And then once that's all set up, I'll just have to put tape over the front, paint everything black to light block it, and then that will complete the interior of the cockpit. And then we'll go ahead and show a final review. All right, so I have everything painted black underneath. There's a few light leaks, but nothing major that I need to worry about. I just didn't want a lot of lights flooding through. But here is the final completed cockpit. See the white hallway in the background there. The cool light bluish tint in the front cockpit. There's the pilot. Sorry for the shakiness. Can still make out pretty good the controls that are blinking and changing colors, which I think is pretty awesome. And the side lights. And I'm just holding it in place, so I don't have it glued in. You can make out a little bit there on the side. You can see some blinking lights. Not too bad. Not all of them. On the other side as well. But overall, I think that turned out fantastically. I really like that combination of the cool white in the background and the bluish tint in the foreground, and the little pilot there. So really happy with it. My little the fins that I've added in as well to give it a more correct profile for the front windshield. And the clear plastic in there. Again, it's not. There we go. It's not in this straight, I'm just holding it in there. But okay, so fantastic. Really happy with how that's turned out.
All right, so that's going to wrap up this video for this week. Also, it wraps up the completion of the interior for the pod bay and the cockpit. All the lighting, everything ready to go. It won't be glued into the kit until I add the magnets in the command sphere and do all the painting, the exterior painting and that sort of thing. I will begin working on the outer parts of the kit, building the spine, the propulsion unit, getting everything else done. And there's a few more modifications that I'm going to do as well. So stay tuned. Thank you to all my new subscribers, and I will see you next time.